Psychology of aging is an important area, because eventually aging affects all of us, and aging is affecting all of us throughout our lives anyway. Thinking about the long-term impacts of everything that we do, our health behaviour, our education throughout our lives all have an impact on our later life. But some of the particular myths around the psychology of aging that I think is worth thinking about as we look at aging as researchers are the things that you hear people say. So things like, it comes to us all when people are talking about memory failures, or it's inevitable, it happens to everybody. One of the areas that I work on is basically debunking those kind of myths, that everybody does not get dementia as they get older, for example. Everybody doesn't necessarily even get memory declines as they get older. A lot of people do, and memory decline becomes more common as people get older, but it's not inevitable. And when I talk to students about this, one of the things I try and get them to remember is that if they forget everything else I tell them, the important thing to remember is that variability increases as you get older, as your population gets older. So although the mean might move a little bit, the spread around the mean for performance on memory or on reaction time or any other kind of cognitive function that you might want to measure will increase as you get older. So there'll be people who are still performing as well as they did when they were 19, but there will be more people who are performing less well. So that the variability is the important thing. And probably if you take that as a starting point of your investigations, why do we get that variability, and what makes the difference between one 80-year-old who's really, really struggling, perhaps with physical health problems, with frailty, with cognitive change, with memory impairments, and then the next 80-year-old you meet is still working, perhaps still writing papers if they were a scientist, or still climbing mountains, or still fixing the pipes, or whatever it was that they did, and they're carrying on doing everything they ever did, and there's no observable change, so they're still fit and well and their memory's good. So what makes for those differences? And that's something where I think psychology can have a big impact. And there's a whole range of areas where we can have a look, and a lot of it comes down to health, as you might expect. So if you have your heart, and as well as your physical capabilities, but health is not, again, health changes aren't always inevitable. Obviously some of them are things that you can't do anything about, but there are a lot of things that you can do to maintain brain health as you get older. So we look at health behavior. So health behavior can include a whole range of things, like keeping physically fit, like having a good diet, like having positive relationships and good social links. So when I put together all of these things, I start looking at things like frailty. So frailty you can think of as an accumulation of deficits as you get older, or an accumulation of resilience as you get older, in terms of it can include physical activity and physical health, but it can also include social links. So whether you're lonely or not, whether you're socially isolated or not. And all these things are part of health behaviour, and they accumulate to have healthy outcomes on your cognition, but also on your well-being and your quality of life as you get older. So there's been a lot of research on predictors of dementia. And although I tend to look outside of dementia in terms of cognitive change outside of dementia, dementia is the thing that people fear most, I think. But what we've found is that there are various factors that can prevent dementia, and we know from huge epidemiological studies that these factors can account for between 30 and 40% of cases of dementia, and most of them are related to health behaviour. So things like smoking, things like physical exercise, things like loneliness. They're all things that can be addressed, but it also includes things like early life education. Midlife hearing changes, which you can't necessarily control, but you can use hearing aids, for example. So there's a whole range of things that we can do about it. And I think if we sum it up, we could say what's good for your heart in all kinds of different ways of thinking is good for the brain. If I think about one example of research that I've been involved in, I've done quite a lot of research on autobiographical memory. That's an interest of mine. So looking at how people tell stories about what's happened in the past or long time ago or recently. It's what we do, it's how we interact socially. So, you know, when we meet with a friend, we say, what have you been doing this week? We talk about what we've been doing. We might, if they're people we've known a long time or family, we might say, oh, remember when? We might reminisce. And that's a really important part of our social engagement. And we also use it when we're solving problems. So if we have a noisy neighbour, for example, we think about, well, what did I do last time I had a problem with my neighbour, or a problem with a different neighbour? Or what did so-and-so tell me they did when they had a noisy neighbour? So we use autobiographical memory to help us solve social problems. But what sometimes happens as people get older is that their ability to remember autobiographical events specifically changes. So that's the difference between saying, well, we used to go to parties and we used to have a nice time, versus one day I went to this party and so spilt their wine and this kind of thing. So it's about being specific, being able to remember things specifically. So I've looked at this in quite a lot of detail because it does seem to have quite a lot of influence. We know, for example, that it has an influence on whether people become depressed or not, or if you are depressed, on whether you recover from that. And that goes across the age range, not just for older people. Being unable to be specific about autobiographical events can affect recovery from depression. And that goes for younger people and older people as well. But what we found, particularly with older people, is it does affect that ability to be specific, does affect your ability to solve social problems, to overcome difficulties perhaps that may come as you get older. So to overcome, say, a mobility difficulty, for example, or to overcome a difficulty that you might be having with cooking for yourself, or with your sensory impairments perhaps. So to overcome difficulties, you need to problem solve, and we use autobiographical memory a lot for problem solving. So when we look at this, we find that also has an impact on being independent as you get older. So, you know, although it sounds like just a minor thing that's changing as you get older in terms of your ability to recall things, and you think, well, surely that doesn't matter that much. It does seem to happen to matter quite a lot, because it has this impact on problem solving, and eventually that has an impact on independence. So one of the things that we're particularly interested in is looking at, can we intervene with this? Can we help people recall things more specifically? And can that have an impact then on people's social engagement and on people's independence? And what we find is different ways of attempting to rehabilitate that particular skill does have those impacts. So which is quite exciting, really, just to, you know, something as minor as practicing recalling events specifically can have, you know, quite wide-ranging effects on your emotional health, on your social interaction, and on your independence. So I'll stop there. There's a whole range of other things we can talk about with psychology of aging, because it can have an impact on a whole range of different aspects of life. But I think those two things I'll stop with there.